Welcome to The Jeweler's View. I'm Courtney Gray, metalsmith, educator, and creative business strategist. After 25 years in the jewelry industry, running one of the country's top metalsmithing schools, coaching artists, advising companies and organizations, and hosting interviews with some of the best in the craft, I finally created the kind of support I wish I'd had from the start. This podcast is a part of that. Each week, I share the lessons I had to learn the hard way so you can build a rhythm that supports your creative work, your values, and the life and business you actually want. Find tools, coaching, and my Transform course at CourtneyGrayArts.com, and let's get to work. Welcome back, my friend. I want to tell you about a conversation I had with a student. This was a long time ago at my school. This young lady came into my office and sat down. She said, I have 6 months. If this isn't working by then, I have to go back to a full-time job. That's a real deadline, not a preference, but a hard line. She had a small savings cushion, a partner with patience, and a mental runway. And she had done the math on how long she could sustain the uncertainty. And then she asked me directly, can I do this in 6 months? Now, I didn't tell her yes, and I didn't tell her no. I told her it depends. That answer isn't a dodge. It's the most honest thing I could say, because 6 months means something completely different depending on where you're starting. It depends on your skill level. Are you still learning the craft? Or are you refining something you already know how to do? Those are two entirely different timelines. If you're still developing the core skill, you're splitting your energy. Part of your capacity goes toward getting better, and part goes toward building a business. That's not a problem, but it has to be factored into the timeline. You don't get to count those as the same hours. 10 hours a week is a different conversation than 40. And I'd push further. It's not just about the quantity of hours, it's the quality of them. 10 focused strategic hours where you're working on the things that actually move the business forward can outperform 40 scattered ones. Most people are busy and still not building. Busyness and traction are not the same thing. It depends on your pricing. Someone selling $150 pieces needs a very different volume than someone doing $2,500 custom work. This sounds obvious, but the implications run deep. If you're underpriced, you need more transactions, more clients, more energy, more time. And you honestly burn out faster on work that was supposed to be sustainable. Pricing is not just math. It's a structural decision that shapes everything downstream. It depends on whether people already know you, whether you have any audience at all, or whether you're starting from zero. Both are workable, do not get me wrong, but they require different strategies, different patience, and different expectations for when the first real wave of clients will come. It depends on whether you're comfortable selling yet, not just making, asking, following up, having the conversation when someone is on the fence and guiding them through it. A lot of creative people are excellent at the work and genuinely resistant to the asking. That gap doesn't close on its own. It has to be practiced and nurtured like any other skill. It depends on how consistently you're showing up, weekly, visibly, in the places your clients actually are, not just when you feel inspired, not just when you have something new to announce, but consistently. Which means showing up when nothing is working and no one is responding, and you're doing it anyway. And most importantly, it depends on what number you're actually trying to hit. The last one is where most people stall. They say they want it to work, but they haven't defined what working means. $1,000 a month is a different plan than 3,000. 3,000 is a different plan than 8 or 10. And each of those numbers has different implications for pricing, volume, time investment, and what kind of clients you need to be finding. Without a real number, 6 months is just hope with a deadline attached. So let me be direct about this. because I think vagueness here does real harm. 6 months of focused, consistent effort can build traction. It can get you early sales, some repeat clients, visibility in your space, and proof that the concept works. That's meaningful and that's worth having. What it rarely builds is full sustainability, stable, predictable income, the kind of word of mouth that runs itself, the kind of client base that starts to compound. That takes longer. I also want to say this about traction because I think it's easy to miss. Traction in the first 6 months often doesn't look like money. Sometimes it looks like the right person finding you, a conversation that didn't close but planted something, planted a seed, a piece of work you made that starts circulating, or an audience that's small but genuinely engaged. None of that shows up in your bank account yet, unfortunately, but it's not nothing. If you're only measuring by income in those early months, you'll dismiss real progress as failure. In my experience, and I've watched a lot of people build and close and pivot and change directions, all the things. 1 year of genuinely consistent effort is where you start to see real movement. Not 1 year of trying when you feel like it, 1 year of consistent output, consistent visibility, consistent follow up, relationship building, asking for referrals, tracking your numbers, and refining your pricing as you go. And for most people, true stabilization, the point where income is steady and the business has its own momentum, that's honestly closer to 3 to 5 years. I know that's not what most people want to hear, but I'd rather say it plainly than let someone think they failed at 6 months when they were actually right on schedule. And here's where I want to be direct because I see this constantly. Most people assume that if the work is good, it will sell, that quality is the strategy. It isn't. Quality is the floor. It's the entry requirement. It's what keeps a client who already found you from leaving. But it doesn't do the finding. It doesn't do the trusting. It doesn't do the convincing. And it definitely doesn't follow up. You have to share the process, not just the finished piece, the thinking behind it, the decisions you made, the problem you were solving. People don't just buy the outcome, they buy their understanding of the outcome. And if they don't know what they're looking at, they can't value it. Education is part of the sale. It's not a bonus, it's load bearing, it's important. You have to follow up more than once, more than feels comfortable sometimes. Most people follow up once and interpret silence as rejection. It usually isn't. It's life, it's distraction. It's someone who was interested and got pulled away. One message sent and not returned is not a closed door. It's an opening that you haven't walked through yet. You have to ask directly. This is the one I see people avoid most often. They hint, they suggest, they make it easy for someone to say yes without ever actually asking the question. And then they're confused when nothing converts. Ask the question. People who want to say no will say no. You lose nothing. And the people who are waiting to be asked, you just brought them into your orbit. You have to stay visible, not just when you have something new to announce, but consistently over time. The algorithms reward it, yes, indeed. But more importantly, humans do. We buy from people we've seen before. Familiarity creates trust, and trust precedes the transaction. Sales come from repetition and trust, not one post, not one show, not one email that goes unanswered. The cumulative effect of consistent showing up is what makes someone think of you when they're actually ready to buy. Even if they weren't ready the last 12 times they saw you, the work that got you here is your skill. And the work that actually builds the business is everything else. I want to tie this back to what we've been talking about in the last 2 episodes. If building this is financially necessary, if you genuinely need it to work, that pressure honestly can be useful. It forces decisions, it forces clarity. It removes the option of drifting. Some people build their best under that kind of constraint. The deadline makes the work serious in a way that open-ended exploration doesn't. But listen, there's a risk in necessity too. And I don't want to gloss over that part. When the pressure is high enough, it can shorten your patience in ways that hurt you. You stop planting seeds because you need them to be trees by Thursday. You make reactive pricing decisions. You take clients who aren't right for you because you need the money. Necessity is a fuel, but it's a fuel that can burn things down if you're not watching it. If building this isn't financially necessary, that comes with its own risk, the slow drift, the indefinite timeline, the I'll get serious about it when that never quite arrives. If you don't have the pressure or the fuel of necessity, you have to manufacture urgency from somewhere else. A real commitment to a real number by a real date. Not because you'll collapse if you miss it, but because a deadline you chose is still a deadline or a goal line. Without that, without a defined financial target, a defined time commitment, and a real reason to keep going when nothing is visibly responding, 6 months doesn't become a deadline. It becomes a slow fade. This is something we're working through right now inside Transform, and it's been one of the most clarifying parts of the program. One of the first things we do is get people out of the vague and into the specific. Not, I want this to work, but what number are you really building toward? What tier are you operating in? And is that the right tier for what you want and need to earn? What does a realistic timeline look like given your actual hours, your actual skill level, your actual capacity for showing up? And then we build a plan around the answers, not around the wish. What's been interesting to watch is how much shifts for people just in that clarifying process. A lot of people walk in thinking they have a marketing problem or a sales problem, and what they actually have is a definition problem. They've never named the number. They've never looked honestly at the gap between what they're doing and what the number requires. Once they do that, the path forward gets a lot clearer. Not easier necessarily, but clearer. That's the work right now. Specificity over hope. There is no version of this that happens overnight. The people who look like they built something fast almost always put in years before anyone starts watching. The overnight success is usually a decade in the making. And the decade looks like quietly building, adjusting, failing without an audience, trying again, getting better until one day the visibility catches up to the preparation. If you want something sustainable, something that actually holds, expect it to take time. Expect to adjust. Expect some of what you built to stop working and require rebuilding. That's not failure. That's the nature of a living thing. But here's what's true on the other side of that. When it stabilizes, it stabilizes. The compounding that felt invisible for years starts to show. The clients start to refer other clients. The work starts to find people. The business starts to carry some of its own weight instead of requiring everything from you all of the time. That's the goal. And when you build it intentionally with a real plan, a real number, and a real commitment, it lasts in a way that something built on momentum alone never does. Momentum fades. Structure doesn't. So that's the arc of these 3 episodes. Momentum stalls, you decide, you let go of what no longer fits, and you commit to what's next. You give it real time and real effort. You measure the right things, and you stay in it through the part where nothing seems to be responding. That's not a formula. It's just what it actually looks like to build a business. And if you're somewhere in the middle of that right now, somewhere between the stall and the stability, I hope this helped you see where you are a little more clearly. You're inside the process. All right, that's enough for now. Keep building, keep showing up, stay visible even when it doesn't feel like anybody's watching, because I guarantee you they are. I'll see you next week. Onward and upward. Thanks for listening to The Jeweler's View. If today's episode gave you something to think about, you'll find tools, coaching, resources, and the Transform course at CourtneyGrayArts.com. Remember, you're not behind. You're becoming exactly the kind of maker your business needs. And that kind of depth, it takes time. I'll be back next week, same time, onward and upward.